most of the people that were waiting in. Good evening. My name is Pat Kowitzel. I'm with Magic City Books. I want to welcome you and thank you for joining us this evening and spending a little bit of your Wednesday night with us. We're thrilled to be doing this virtual author event tonight in celebration of local writer Hanna Howard's debut YA novel, Ignite the Sun. We would just really wish that we were able to do this one in person. It is so much fun to be able to introduce a debut author to an audience, whether it's in the store or at one of our venues around town. And we're sad that we're not able to do that. But on the other hand, we're able to welcome people from much further away and those of you joining us from outside of the Tulsa area. It's wonderful to have you. Thank you for spending a little bit of time with us. And we're so glad that you're able to be here tonight. We are but I have just a couple of announcements real quick to let you know. We've been doing a lot of these virtual events about the middle of April, and we've been doing 2 or 3 a week, and we had a couple of big announcements that have happened in just the last couple of days, and so if you weren't aware of them, we wanted to make sure that you were aware. Sort of in order of when they're going to be happening. 1 week from tonight, this was just announced today, 1 week from tonight, we're going to be welcoming Joy Harjo and Leanne Howe and Jennifer Forster for anthology of poetry that they have edited and worked on. That's Native poetry, and really the first comprehensive Native Nations poetry anthology, certainly in a long time. Joy, of course, many of you know her, a Tulsa Artist Fellow and the U.S. Poet Laureate. And she lives right here in Tulsa, at least some of the time. And so we're really excited to be able to bring this event to everyone. So that'll be next Wednesday night, a free event hosted on Zoom. Then the following Sunday, which is August 30th, we're going to be doing a virtual event with Hannibal Johnson at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Sunday, August 30th, and Hannibal's new book, Black Wall Street 100, is sort of a follow-up to his previous book, Black Wall Street, with the centennial anniversary coming up of the Tulsa Race Massacre of 1921. This is just kind of a renewal and refreshment, and that previous book, Black Wall Street, came out more than 2 decades ago, and so a lot of things have happened in the meantime. A ballpark has been built, new development has happened and continues to happen in downtown Tulsa, and also a lot is going on with the Race Commission and the project to find potential mass graves and everything that's going on that way. So this book is an update of the previous book, Black Wall Street, which I know that a lot of people out there have read. But this is going to be a really great conversation and in a lot of ways kind of kicking off a whole series of events that will be happening in the next 8 to 12 months around the Race Massacre. So join us for that. That's going to be an important one. And then finally, we have a ticketed event. Most of these events have been free. The first 2 I mentioned are both free, but we do have a ticketed event coming up with Margaret Atwood. The paperback release of The Testaments is happening in September. And so we are one of the, I think, 4 stops on her virtual book tour. And so we're really excited to be doing that event. That is going to be the Tuesday after Labor Day, September 8th. You have to purchase a ticket, but with that ticket, you get a link to the Zoom event and a signed copy of her book, The Testament. So magiccitybooks.com gives you all the information. We're going to be posting some links in the chat tonight, and so you'll be able to get some of that information. And then also, you can always, subscribe to the newsletter and be able to get all the stuff that's happening. All right, enough with the announcements and PSAs. It is time for tonight's event, and we are really thrilled to be welcoming Hanna Howard tonight to celebrate her debut novel, Ignite the Sun. Joining Hanna in conversation is going to be a friend of hers, Joanna Ruth Meyer, who is an author in her own right of Echo North and other books, and Joanna's joining us from Arizona tonight. And that's one of the great things about doing these virtual events is that we can put authors together in conversation, even though they're not here in the same city. So we're really excited to be welcoming Joanna and Hanna. If you have any questions for either of our authors tonight, please utilize the Q&A function here within Zoom. If you're joining us on the Facebook event, you can leave that question in the comments there, and we will get to it as we can. Without any further ado, thank you very much for joining us. Here is Joanna, Ruth, Meyer, and Hanna Howard.
Yay!
And I'm so excited to be chatting with you virtually. I mean, it would be better to be in person, but virtual is better than nothing. And we get to live out our dream of a tea party event. So,
this is so true. The long-held dream.
Yes. So we both have full pots here, I believe, to sip as we chat. To get started, would you like to give a little pitch of Ignite the Sun?
Yeah. So if you haven't heard yet, Ignite the Sun is my book that just came out yesterday, and it's a YA fantasy novel. So written for the 12 to 18 age group, but certainly that's not the only age group that can read it. It's my favorite genre, and I'm 34. So, but it's about a girl, 16-year-old girl who has lived her whole life in a land that's dark. She's never seen the sun. And so she finds out, this isn't too much of a spoiler, but she finds out early on that she has this sort of elemental magic that connects her to the sun, which makes her sort of realize that she might be able to bring back the sun to her world. But there's a witch queen that is kind of getting in her way. So that's the short pitch.
And it's a really, really good book. Obviously, everybody is here because they're excited about it. So Hanna and I are going to be kind of rambling, chatting. I don't know about you, Hanna, but I've recently realized that I'm a rambler when I talk or answer questions or anything like that. So apologies in advance if I get too rambly. But,
well, I recently discovered that I'm a verbal processor, so we can both have disclaimers that we're going to try and, keep it tight, but who knows?
Yes, no promises, but we're going to try. So I thought we'd start out with kind of sharing the story of our internet friendship. I guess we are true millennials because we met on the internet about 6 years ago now, I think.
Yeah.
So once upon a time, Hanna and I were both fledgling querying authors, and Hanna was querying the book formerly known as Sunchild, which is Ignite the Sun, and I was querying Beneath the Haunting Sea, the book formerly known as The Whale in the Tree.
Best title ever.
Yep, and we were both on our individual querying journeys, and we both were using this site called Query Tracker, which is still around today, but I think it's changed a lot.
Doesn't have the chat function, I don't think.
Yeah, because there used to be like different pages for all the different agents, and the authors that were querying could get in this chat and say, hey, I queried on this date and I got a rejection on this date, or I'm still waiting, or whatever. So it kind of built a little community of kind of letting authors know when to expect a response, basically. And so both Hanna and I got a partial request from the same agent. And so we met in this chat, like underneath that agent's page. And I don't exactly know why or how this quite started, but our comments in that little chat led to both of us talking to each other nicely on the internet. And we wound up in this long Twitter direct message thread, which turned into, as all internet friendships go through the long rambling email phase.
Yep.
We changed quite a number of long rambling emails, and we became fast friends.
Yep.
And we were basically there for each other during the long and arduous querying process. And then, so we met in like November, would you say? Something like that, October,
Something like that.
Of 2014.
Yeah.
And the following March, the most shocking thing happened. Both of us wound up with multiple agent offers in the exact same week. And all of a sudden, us, us wallflower INFP querying authors were given the opportunity to choose between multiple agents that wanted us, which was terrifying. And I still feel bad about some of the agents that I said no to.
Oh no.
I might have one of those soon. Mine's asleep on the floor.
Yeah, advanced apologies for any cats who may or may not appear.
Yes, we're cat and tea ladies.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what was I saying? I got off on a trail. The cat
Yeah. Well, we both had offers from agents and had to figure out which one to choose, which was more than all of our wildest dreams combined. And we got to walk through it together, which was so fun.
Yeah, it's still crazy to me that happened at exactly the same
week.
Yeah.
And
so,
I think the moral of that story is that not all internet stalking leads to creepy things. There can be like beautiful, good friendships that come out of internet stalking. So, just have good intentions with your internet stalking and you'll be okay.
Yeah, and sometimes you'll find a kindred spirit.
Yeah.
So, so that's kind of the story of our internet friendship. And I'm just so happy to be here celebrating Sunchild with you. It's been a long time coming. And I'm just really happy that it's out there in the world, and I can't wait for my copy to appear. I don't have any swag or a copy or anything, but imagine that I'm lovingly holding your book. There it is. There it is. Yes. So welcome to the world, Ignite the Sun.
Yay.
Hey. So Hannah, I'm going to ask you a series of interview questions now. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. So can you tell us a little bit about the background of this book, what sparked the idea, and kind of a little bit about the writing process?
Yeah. So the novel that is now called Ignite the Sun, as Joanna mentioned, was once called Sunchild. So if you hear me talk about it as Sunchild, know that I'm in like that part of my memory where it exists as that. But I started writing this book a long time ago, actually a long time ago, like almost 10 years ago. And it was kind of born out of a season of real like mental darkness for me. Well, the ideas came from several different places, and I tell people that ideas come from being curious. That's what I believe about ideas. But there were a couple of moments of curiosity that kind of gave me these thoughts about something called a sunchild that could only fly in the sunlight, and then something called the darkness that was this entity, and then, putting those two together. So when I actually started writing the book, I was in the middle of my first ever experience with panic attacks and anxiety and depression. And I was really trying to figure it out and honestly, like, get through it. And so it was a winter. And if you live in Tulsa and you have lived in Tulsa for a while, you might remember that late January of 2011, we had a wild snowstorm, and people in other parts of the country might laugh. But for us, it was really, really big. And like the city closed down. I didn't go to work for, I think, 2 weeks. And most people weren't working because we didn't have the, snow plows or whatever to deal with it. And so I had this book that I was ready to write at that point. And I basically spent that whole time of being snowed in writing this book. And kind of along with that, January in Tulsa is a really gray time and a really oppressive, dark time. And it can seem interminable sometimes. Like January is usually the longest month of my life per year. Longest month of my year, I guess, is how you would say that. But anyway, so I just felt like the whole time I was writing that first draft, I felt like oppressed by the literal world around me as well as my mental world. And so I think so much of that experience fed into the book. And, as I wrote the story, I sort of processed like what it would feel like to live in this extreme circumstance of not ever having seen the sun. But, what for me, it felt like to live in a world that felt pretty sunless for, months at a time. And yeah, all of the kind of attendant mental and emotional weight that came with that. So, and the writing process itself, the first draft was fast. It's 10 years later, so you can you know, take that to mean that the subsequent edits and redrafts have not been so fast, but yeah.
Yeah, I generally find that drafting is a lot easier than the arduous revision that comes after.
Yeah.
I think that's a really special way that your book came about. I think a lot of us can relate to figurative sunlessness in the general, vicinity of the world at large lately.
Yeah.
That's very relatable to what, we're all dealing with right now. Sort of bouncing off of that, was there a particularly difficult part of the book to write and a particularly enjoyable part?
Yeah, well, in general, for this book, I've written other books before when this wasn't necessarily the case, but I found the love story in this book a little bit challenging at times. I think, I'm not sure why. I was about to hypothesize about why. It wasn't that way the last book that I wrote, but this one had at times some difficulty for me. And maybe because it changed from draft to draft. There was a while where there was a lot more angst, and then the angst kind of got toned back. And maybe I'm a better writer of love stories when there can be a lot of angst. But the easiest or the most enjoyable parts for me in this book were, for sure, the sun bits. In case you didn't gather from that last anecdote, my experience with sunlessness, especially in those years of kind of the heavy mental stuff, was a pretty intense obsession with sunlight. And so I love the way that sunlight gilds things. I love the look of it on anything in the world. And the descriptive words for sunlight and fire and all things glowing are just the best words. And so I had so much fun writing anything to do with the sun itself, or the kind of ways that magic manifests itself in the world. I also really enjoy writing action sequences, and so there are a fair number of those in the book, and I love all of those. So
that's awesome. I am obsessed with the word gilded. Just
yeah,
beautiful, gilded and luminous, and I love all those light words too. Even though I have far too much sunlight in Arizona, we're in like long streak of, it's been 110 degrees or hotter for like more than 40 days in a row now. We're like setting all kinds of like horrific records.
It's terrible.
Yeah. Whew, that's a lot, but I don't like writing action scenes. Sometimes it's like I have a hard time keeping track of where everything is, and it's like, I don't know, too much for me to keep track of.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I have to pause from like all of the inner emotion to say like where people are. That's not as interesting to me. I don't know. It always makes me like time to write action scenes.
I like it. Well, you do it well in spite of that.
It's because I revise those parts a lot. Let's see, here is a question for you. Do you have a personal headcanon of what happens to these characters after the book ends?
Oh.
This is my sneaky way of asking if there's any chance of a sequel.
You know, I don't know if there's any chance of a sequel. This book sold as a standalone, which means that I'm not contracted to write anymore. It doesn't mean that there can't be more. So just at the moment, there is not certainly anymore. My headcanon is a lot more adventures because I didn't close this book as the only one until like my last edit with my agent. She was like, you know, it's easier to sell a book as a standalone than as this has to be a series kind of a book. And so could you make the ending more final? And at first I was like, no, I can't, this isn't the end. But then it was a really I think important mental exercise for me emotional exercise. Here's this cat again. I'm really sorry. He doesn't even like me. To close the book because, close the ending off, because it allowed me to give the book its own life, I guess. Like, let it exist as its own thing without it needing to be more, and without me needing it to be more. So if you've read it, you'll know that the ending has enough looseness that it could lead to more, but it doesn't need to have more. So yeah, that's all I'll say.
Very, very intriguing. I think that especially with a debut novel, there's a lot of like mental and like emotional things that go into it, because my debut was very many years from first draft to published version as well. And it does go through so many changes. First, I'm sure you did a ton of drafts yourself before you queried. And then did like I did a couple rewrites with my agent and then like another rewrite with my editor. And it's very interesting like how it grows and changes. And I felt like with my debut, it became more itself with all of the changes that I made.
Yeah.
I had a hard time with like some of the emotional things too, because I changed my main character's personality like a little bit. And at one point there were like 3 boys and my agent told me that was too many boys. So we went back to just the 2, but yeah, sometimes it's hard to keep connected when you are making all of those changes, and yet somehow it ends up being the thing that it was meant to be.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I had the same experience, cutting characters and feeling like, but how? And then it was like, no, this is more it.
Yep. Yeah. It's very part of it was first my agent and then my editor encouraged me to have an actual coherent plot, which I just want to write like and characters drinking tea. So I have other people in my life saying, no, you need a plot. So changing gears a little bit, what would your main characters order if they went into a coffee shop?
Man.
Non-COVID world, of course.
Yeah, perfect. It's hard to imagine a non-COVID world at this point, I find, and that's a whole other conversation. I think that's a great question. So we'll go through them, and we'll see if I can get my answers together without rambling too much. I think we'll start with Syria, and she would probably have, I think, a chai latte. I think this because chai has always had a kind of spicy, like, sunness to it to me. I'm not sure why. Maybe because it comes from a warm place. But yeah, I think she would have a chai latte. Lyndon, who is a wood nymph, would have green tea, because that's the most foresty thing there is probably at a coffee shop. Meryl, who's my naiad, would have water because she, probably doesn't have a choice. I don't know. She needs it so much. Yarrow's kind of a tough nut to crack because he's really practical and sort of, I don't know, he doesn't waste time on things that are unnecessary. He'd probably just have a black coffee.
Yeah, real black coffee vibes.
Yeah. Who else?
What about
Elegy? I want to say she'd have like a passion fruit tea. She's like,
not right, or something
maybe
like
she's young. What'd you say?
she would get something really sweet, like a vanilla bean frappuccino or something.
Oh yeah. See, this is me showing that I don't really know my coffee shop menus very well.
Okay. All right. Do you want to do your reading now?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, let's do that.
If we have time, I'll ask you the last question.
Okay.
Make sure we have
So,
time.
as is classic with book launches, I'm going to read a little bit of the book. And I was thinking of just reading the prologue, but is that boring? Has everyone already read the prologue?
You gotta follow your heart. I like the prologue. I think it's fabulous.
I'm gonna read the prologue. It's just a bite-sized bit, and it's okay. Quick story about the prologue. How are we doing on time?
We've got halfway through about.
Okay, then I can tell the story about the prologue. The prologue has been in and out for a lot of different revisions, and the first time I wrote it, I don't even remember what revision it was because 10 years it has a lot of revisions. But the first time I wrote it, I was like, this is what it needs. This is like, this helps begin it. It helps tie it together. It also had, you know, an opening line that I loved. And then there came a day when my agent was like, I don't think the prologue is doing anything, and we're trying to cut words because I am an over worder when it comes to drafting and really revising. If my goal is to cut words in my revision, I will invariably add words. I'm not sure how it happens. Anyway, she made me cut the prologue, and at the time, and I think in general, I think, yes, you're right, you're wise, because she is. But I really I felt this sort of wrench letting go of it. And then later, like multiple drafts later, we were looking for like a really solid beginning. And I was like, I think we should bring the prologue back. And there was another girl at the agency who was kind of working with us at the time, and she was in favor. And so my agent was like, yeah, okay, let's do it. So we brought it back, and there it has stayed, and I still love it. It's, I think, maybe my favorite part of the book. So I'll read the prologue. All right, here's the book, because it's lovely. Yarrow, tell me about the sun. Eh? He looked up from his lap, the unwound strings of his fiddle sprawling like insect antennae into the air. What for? I want to hear about the way things used to be, I said, before the darkness. The old man returned to stringing the instrument, brows furrowed. I glanced across the small cabin, warm and smoke-scented from the fire in the hearth, to where Lyndon Hatch, Yarrow's grandson and my best friend since I was 6 years old, sat mending socks. He waved me on with an enthusiastic nod. I stood up, forgetting the feathers I'd been sorting into piles for arrow fletching, causing them to flutter down around me in a whirling cloud. I laughed and spun away from them toward Yarrow. Once upon a time, there was something called the sun, I prompted, staggering to a halt in front of his rocking chair. Yarrow pressed his lips together, but his stone-colored eyes had gone warm and sparkling. He scratched his bald head and wrinkled his brow, making his bushy gray eyebrows look so much like caterpillars I half expected them to crawl right off his face. You start at Gildenbrook next week, Syria. Don't you think you might do better to go home and get to bed? My shoulders sagged. Gildenbrook. Stiff lace gowns and tedious lessons for the next 6 years of my life. I wish I could learn to be a gardener instead, I said wistfully. You and Lyndon could teach me. Yarrow snorted. What would your mother and father do with a gardener for a daughter? They want you to become a proper young lady, not a hired hand. He didn't point out the obvious, that my tramping around the dark grounds of our manor with him and Lyndon every day practically made me a hired hand already. I looked around the old cabin, at the scrubbed wooden table, the mismatched curtains I had helped sew, the floor-to-ceiling piles of firewood beside the hearth, more home to me than Nightingale Manor had ever been, and wilted slightly. Yarrow was right. My parents didn't want a gardener for a daughter. But one more week couldn't hurt. I leaned forward and put my hands over the wiry strings of Yarrow's fiddle. Tell me about the way things used to be, I pleaded. Tell me about how the sun would light up the whole world, and about the trees being green and leafy, and about grass and blue sky and sunlight and birds and magic. His laughter rolled out in an infectious rumble, making his rocking chair lurch backward and sending me toppling sideways. I think you already know it all, Weedy. Not the way you do. Lyndon had abandoned his darning and was now dragging a fat sack of grain across the floor to the woven rug in front of the rocking chair. We plopped back against it and gazed expectantly up at Yarrow, who sighed. Lyndon grinned at me, messy brown hair everywhere, the dimple winking in his right cheek. Setting aside his half-strung fiddle, Yarrow reached for his pipe and began packing it. I sniffed to catch the spicy, loamy scent, the smell of stories, and waited with my feet tapping while he went to light a taper in the fireplace and ignite the tobacco. Once upon a time, he said, turning back to us as the bowl glowed orange and a trickle of smoke crept from the corner of his mouth, there was something called the sun.
I remember early on when we both met on the internet, we swapped the manuscript that we were querying with. And I remember like reading that scene. I think that was in the version that you sent me. And it stuck with me, and I'm so glad that you got to put that back in.
Thanks. Me too. I love it still.
It's just a wonderful, perfect beginning, and all these lovely character hints, and I just love it. I love that line. Smells like stories. Was that in there?
Smell of stories, tobacco. Yeah.
I love that. I think it's beautiful. I'm so glad you got to keep it. Let's see here. What time we got? Should we move on to audience questions?
Yeah.
And then if we have time, I'll ask you that other question that I have for you. So let's see. Now I'm going to click on this button and see what happens.
Cool.
Okay, Rachel would like to know how many drafts you wrote in 10 years between the first draft and now.
That's a really excellent question, and I wish I had an accurate answer. So I can try and verbally process. There was one, I'm gonna work backwards. There was one with my editor, which is the most recent one. And I'll stop there and say that I went through 2 editors because one of them left the imprint. When she first got it, she was like, this is one of the most polished books I've ever read at this stage. And it's because it had been 10 years. So 1 with my editor, I think 4 with my agent.
Are you serious?
I think it was 4.
Okay, but we're up to a full hand.
We're at 5.
Okay.
And then I would say at least 1 per year before that. And so I signed with her in 2015, and I started writing the book in the beginning of 2011. So how many more is that?
2011, 2012, 2013, 2014.
Joanna does math like me.
Of course I do. So 1 per year, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. So at least 10 full drafts, and lots of tinkering.
That's so many. I think I had about that many for my debut. It was at least like 9. I always say it's like I have drafts and then like 0.5. So I'll be like, this is draft 4.5 because I changed stuff, but not all. I don't know.
It's sort of depressing to think like I could have written 10 books in this amount of time.
But you'll be so much faster with all subsequent books.
Yeah. Hey,
all the future books won't take 10 years, I promise.
because they'll have deadlines.
Yeah. Really long.
Should we pause and take numbers, do you think?
Sure, yeah. So we have 3 giveaway packs that we are going to do. And they're a little bit fragmented because some of them are with me and some of them are with Hannah. But I am giving away a signed copy of Echo North paperback with some other random swag in there, and a signed copy of Beyond the Shadow of Earth. It's shiny and it's soft. And then Hannah.
So both of those books will come with some Ignite the Sun swag, which I'll just show you what that is. A pair of sunglasses that say, once upon a time there was something called the sun, and a book light that says rise in light, defeat the dark, as well as a mug that says rise in light, defeat the dark. Ooh. And some like bookmarks. So those 2 will come with that stuff. And then the last giveaway is a signed copy of Ignite the Sun, which will also come with that stuff. So we were gonna do a giveaway in a sort of, I don't know what you'd call it, basic way. So we have chosen 3 numbers between 1 and 500. So if you would like to enter the giveaway, which we hope you all will, just type a number between 1 and 500 into the chat, would you say? Because there's a chat and a Q&A. Yeah, into the chat. And we will, whoever gets closest to the 3 that we've chosen will win. And if there's a tiebreaker, we'll do trivia.
Yeah.
Cool.
Which will make a spot, right? We definitely have trivia questions.
Exactly.
Okay, back to questions. Haley says, you've talked a lot about the many revisions. What were the easiest scenes to revise? What were the hardest?
Yeah. So the hardest revisions just in general were with the first round of revisions that I did with my agent. And she's a really editorial agent. And thankfully, she just thinks totally different than me in every way. And her brain in that book was exactly what I needed to make it what it needed to be. So she was able to say, here are the things that you're lacking. Here are the areas that, you know, you're doing too much or too little or whatever. And so one of the things that she did was basically like, how do I say, she like honed it essentially. But that honing meant like you cut out a lot of stuff. And so the hardest things to revise for me were scenes and characters that I had through a lot of edits grown very attached to and thought in my like, you know, very biased way of thinking were really essential to the story that I needed to tell. And so she was able to say, no, actually, look, this scene is accomplishing the same thing as this scene over here. Even though they're different scenes, they're accomplishing the same thing. And this character, yeah.
Oh.
And so like realizing that she was right and then like fixing it was the hardest thing that I did, because everything in a book is like a domino, and you have like, you know, lines and lines of dominoes going everywhere. And if you take out or knock over really one, it goes and it impacts a whole lot of other stuff. And so instead of like a scene that was hard to revise, that was just like a way of revising that was really hard because it was just so different than I was used to thinking about the story. So yeah, does that answer the question?
I think so. Yeah, I think realizing either your agent or your editor is right is like 80% of the battle.
Yeah.
Jane wants to know, how did you come up with the names for your characters?
Yeah. Well, some of them I don't remember because it's been so long. Syria, who's my main character, I wanted a name that meant like bright or luminescent. And Sirius, as we all know from Harry Potter, is the dog star. And I was looking around at all these names and wasn't totally satisfied with any of them. And I kept coming back to Sirius and thinking, how could I make that feminine? And so I turned it into Syria. Fun fact, my original editor had a dog named Syria, who she named the exact same way by feminizing Sirius. Isn't that crazy? And then Nightingale is Syria's last name. And a nightingale, you know, we know is a bird that sings in the dark. And so I loved that sort of symbolism for Syria, who's isn't born in the dark, but lives her whole life in the darkness, but sort of perseveres through it. So linden is a type of tree.
I love meaning of names.
Me too. Yarrow is an herb. Yeah, so basically I took the sort of characteristics that I thought that these people would have and developed names from that.
That's awesome. Let's see here. Marcia wants to know, during your process, did you ever get discouraged and want to throw in the towel? If so, how did you overcome and push through the challenges?
Yeah, that's a great question. And yes, absolutely. Writing for publication or pursuing publication is like a really disheartening and sometimes dehumanizing pursuit because like in order to get anywhere, you basically have to wade through like so much rejection. And it's really easy to start thinking, I'm just bad, and I'll never be any good, which isn't true. Publishing is really subjective, and it's like you don't get into an agent relationship without having like a lot of story connection between your agent and your book, because they're not getting anything back for it until they sell it. So they really have to believe in it. Yeah, I think there were a lot of times that I wanted to throw in the towel, and a lot of times that I considered it. I think a couple of things kept me on pursuit. One of them is just like, I loved it, and so I wouldn't want to stop. And I remember at a lot of points thinking like, well, I could stop trying to get published, but I'm not going to stop writing. And so what's the, like, might as well just keep at it. But I would say the other like big factor that kept me invested, if you've got a copy of the book, you might notice that the dedication is to my dad, and he died in 2015 of cancer. But for most of my post-college life in which I was pursuing publication, I had a text from him just about every morning saying, "Are you up? Are you writing?" And that sort of accountability and encouragement, the knowledge that someone that I loved believed in me and believed in what I was doing, was like, fuel for sometimes a dying fire. So yeah, the love of it and the encouragement of the people I love.
That's a really wonderful answer. I'm going to kind of combine two questions here.
Okay.
Catherine and Leslie both are basically asking, what are you working on next?
Yeah. Well, I can't say much because it's not a sold project yet, and so I don't want to, box myself into a hole. Can you box yourself into a hole? I don't know if you can. You can box yourself up and you can back yourself into a hole maybe. Anyway, yes, I'm working on another YA fantasy. It's set in a different world, and it has a dog. That's all I can say.
I've heard the pitch and it sounds very interesting. So, yeah, it's always weird when projects aren't far enough along, or nothing has like technically officially happened with them yet, and it's not. And now you feel like you have secrets, but
yeah, right.
You have secrets. But yeah, I can't wait to read whatever you're writing next. So that'll be really cool. Let's see here. I think we'll do maybe 2 more questions. Okay. Let's see here. Peter wants to know, of all the things that you took out, if there was one that you could put back in just for nostalgia or your own satisfaction, what scene or character or conversation would that be, unless it contains too many spoilers?
Unless it contains spoilers, so I said?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there are 2 scenes that I just loved because of the visual impact they had on my mind. And they were both like big sun moments, sort of sun power moments. One of them was a scene on a boat in a river when my main character became very bright and rose above the river. That was a scene that I loved. And then the other one was a scene in a forest when my character once again became very bright and defeated some beasts. And both of those scenes, I loved writing them, and I felt really, I think I could visualize them really well. So I have a lot of nostalgia tied to them, even though I realize that they don't need to be in the book.
That's so hard.
Yeah.
And then we'll do one more from Carol. How did the story evolve as you grew 10 years older?
Whoa, that's a great question. Man, it's sort of, in some ways I wonder if like I could only see that by comparing the first draft to this final draft, in the same way that like when you are growing older, you don't see what's happening necessarily. You can only just like look at differences as you look backwards. But definitely, and I still think, I've said this before, I think that if I were writing the book new today, it would not be the same story that is in this book. And so the heart of this story is kind of 10 years old, because I never changed the heart of it. But the way that it gets there, or the details of that, I think definitely like grew with me. So I would think probably language, pacing, the way that, like, for sure, the way my character grows is different now than it was at the beginning. So I would hope that like my awareness of humans and how they work would have changed in that time. And I would hope that there's more like love and maturity in it now than there was at the beginning. But I don't know. Yeah.
I think for both of us, between the time when we wrote our debuts first and when they came out, we had just like a lot of life changes.
Yeah.
You had a pandemic baby. Amazing.
Yes, I did.
Yes. So yeah, it's funny like how much can change in 10 years.
Yeah.
Obvious thing to say, but
Yeah, I agree.
so it's kind of cool too that we both have these books that have kind of grown with us.
Yeah.
Ash also sort of stayed the same like the whole time for
Yeah.
those 10, 11 years. Okay, so we're going to kind of transition here to, I'm not good at transitions, so I just say that's what's happening.
I think that's a way to do it.
We're going to do the giveaways here, and it sounds like we have some ties. 1 second here, let's see. Okay, we have one clear-cut winner. Okay, so this first winner is of Echo North, and I will give you the tiniest pitch of it ever. This is a fairy tale retelling of East of the Sun and West of the Moon, which is essentially Beauty and the Beast with a quest at the end. And this version has a scarred girl, a talking white wolf, and an enchanted library.
And it's so good.
So that's that. Comes in a nice paperback. Okay, and so the winning number for Echo North is 137.
Woo!
And closest person to that was Libby Jones with her guess of 135. So congratulations, Libby.
Yay, Libby.
Echo North, yay! Plus all that lovely swag from Hannah. Okay, so now with our other two, we have ties. So let's see. So Jacqueline and Laura both guessed. Well, let's both guess 274, and
Nice.
number is 288. So we're going to ask a trivia question. Hannah, go.
Okay. What should the trivia be about? Something.
Here. Who remembers the original title of Ignite the Sun? Or closest to it. So let's see. Jacqueline, Sunchild. Okay, so I think that means Jacqueline wins, right?
Woo!
Okay. So you have won Beyond the Shadowed Earth,
Nice.
plus all of Hannah's lovely swag. And this is about a girl who makes a deal with the God Tour when she's a child to make her empress. And then when she grows up, everything falls apart. So she goes on a quest of vengeance to kill him.
It's also so good.
So that is that one. And then we have another tie, correct? Are you seeing this chat too, Hannah?
I could be.
So we have one other tie. You have the last number. Do you have it written down? You have the last number?
I made it up.
Okay, I will write it real quick. The last number was 418, and we have a tie between Lizzie Bradford and Guinevere James, who guessed 415 and 421 respectively here. So, Hannah.
Trivia.
Yeah, trivia.
Shoot. I'm so bad at thinking of things on the spot. How about, let me know if you think of one before me.
Okay.
Roughly how many drafts?
Good question.
Between, Lizzie got it.
All right.
And,
Yeah, so she wins the, yeah, there we go.
and
All right.
yeah,
then,
we'll be in touch with everyone who won.
okay, so let's see. Hannah, I'm going to ask you one last quick question that we didn't get
Cool.
before. What are some authors that inspire you and or favorite books?
Yeah, wow, so many. Well, the obvious ones, the classic ones are Tolkien, Lewis, and Rowling, which everyone knows who knows me. Some more maybe recent finds for me, recent as in the last 10 years, the Old Kingdom books by Garth Nix are so good. I love them, and his sort of magic world building is just so unique. Another person who I would say I don't read as extensively as does my husband, but magic systems, again, crazy would be Brandon Sanderson. I admire, yeah, that creativity a lot. Ella Enchanted by Gail Carson Levine is my all-time favorite book. And then there's
Connected with when we were internet stalking each other.
It's true. It was one of those kindred spirit moments. But there's so many classics too that I think I love just the style of, you know, things like Anne of Green Gables and Winnie the Pooh and Heidi, Jane Austen. I also love The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. This is going to turn into just like me listing all my favorite books if we're not careful. But Joanna Ruth Meyer is another one of my favorite authors. She's just an insane word machine, and I admire that so much.
There was a mix-up in our winner one. So Echo North goes to Peter. I have a second copy of the paperback Echo North, and I'm kind of overflowing with them. So Libby, you get one too, okay?
Oh, that's so nice.
Okay, so yeah, there's books for everyone, really.
Books all around.
So that's all I have in our itinerary. Do you have any final words, I guess?
Did you get the question that came in at the very beginning?
Oh, I didn't.
From Guinevere?
Okay. Shall I read that one to you?
Sure, I think it's in the chat.
Okay, I think I found it. So here's the question from who? From Libby?
Guinevere James.
Oh, from Guinevere, yeah, sorry. When Madeleine L'Engle wrote about light and dark, few questioned her metaphor. In this time of Black Lives Matter, do you have concerns, and would you do anything differently if you were doing your final draft right now?
I think that's a really important question, and I think it's one that writers are really aware of right now. This book, I had multiple sensitivity readers look at it before it went to its final copy edits, and we paid a lot of attention to words that could be, you know, kind of laden with extra meaning. I think what I eventually arrived at, though, in those questions of, you know, is there a racial significance to light and dark as a theme? And I would say, I guess, two things. I think it's possible for there to be, and in our world, we have to be aware of that. But I also think that light and dark as a theme is a really old one. And I think, well, in this particular context, it was originally written, if there was metaphor intended, it was to do with mental illness, which is another, I think, really present reality in our world. And so I tried to be really intentional in my revisions, that there was nothing to indicate racial association with light and dark. But yeah, all of us hope and pray that nothing we write is ever taken in a way that's hurtful to other people. And so, yeah, I think, well, I was conscious of it, and definitely I paid attention to every word, and wanted it to be read as it was intended, I guess. So yeah, I hope that answers the question, and I would love to chat with anyone else who wanted to about that further. So.
Alrighty. I think, did we get to everything? Are we closing it out ourselves, Hannah?
I don't know. Pat, are you coming back for the closeout?
Yeah, we didn't talk about that. Thank you all very much for joining us tonight. Really appreciate you all spending some time with us and celebrating Hanna and this fantastic new book. Copies, if you order it from Magic City Books, Hannah's going to be coming in and signing those copies. And so we're getting close to selling out of our initial shipment, but we will have more. We have more already on the way, and we'll get those to you as quickly as we can, and you get them from us and you get a signed one. So there's been links that have been posted in the chat. You can also go to magiccitybooks.com and click on the virtual event store and be able to get the book that way. Thank you, Joanna, for taking some time tonight to talk with Hanna. We really appreciate that, and we're excited about your books. You can get those on the virtual store as well.
Absolutely. And if anybody does order any of my books through Magic City, I have book plates I would love to send you. So
Yes. So we will get those put in and get those shipped from Hanna or from Joanna and get all this stuff out to you quickly. So thank you all very much. Continue to stay safe, keep reading, and we'll see you again real soon.
awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming, everyone.